crew. Welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. My name's Leigh Martinuzzi, and I just want to say thank you, first of all, for taking the time out to tune in. Whether you're watching it on THY TV, hello, or if you're listening online to the Hidden Why podcast, thank you also for taking the time out of your day to tune into my solo rant. Hopefully I can give you some value today. Today I want to share some thoughts that I've been having and sort of just further expand on these thoughts to help, really create a greater understanding myself and wrap my mind around this thought. And also, in doing so, provide you some value and perhaps some insight as to why it matters to the life that we live. And the thought today is about free will entirely. It's about, do we have choice and is there such thing as free will? And how does that matter to the life that we live and the life that we want to live? And there's two very distinct parts. I mean, there's the part of our life up until this point, and there's the part of our life going on beyond this point. And as relates to free will, that's very important to understand this idea, because if there is no such thing as free will, well, how does that matter? And does it matter? Or if there is such thing as free will, if we do have influence and choice over the life that we live, then how does that matter to the life that we really want to create? So it came to my eyes, free will, in a book that I read by Sam Harris called Waking Up. So he's got a podcast called Waking Up, the Waking Up podcast. And he's a really smart dude, really intelligent, as far as I can perceive anyway, from the works that I've read of his and my short experience with his content. But look, I love his podcast. I don't really listen into the political stuff that he talks about, but I love his philosophies. I love the idea of creating a spiritual life without religion. And that's certainly what the book Waking Up is about. But in that book, he talks about the idea of free will. And we all believe that we have free will. However, he sort of suggests that free will scientifically is non-existent. We don't have free will. And the reason for that is because we are a biological structure, and how we operate, our behaviors, our movements, our thoughts, all come about without will. They are just electronic charges within the brain that fire off, and we don't have any control over that, and that causes us to act and think and do things the way we do, therefore creating our life. Now, we all know that, there's that quote by Gandhi, which sort of says that we are I think it's Gandhi, that we are our thoughts, and our thoughts become our beliefs become our behaviors, and our behaviors become our destiny, our reality. And I really believe that. I strongly believe that it all starts with that thought. But if we don't have any free will or control or choice over our thoughts, then perhaps we are doomed for. Maybe we can't really direct and depict the life that we want to create and the life that we want to live. And perhaps that means we need to just accept the life that we've got and go with the flow more. So there's two parts to this thought. One part can sort of be damaging, and one part can sort of be peaceful. It's sort of a nice thought to say, well, if I don't have much control, maybe I should just go with the flow. And in doing that, perhaps I can just live with greater calmness and peace. The other part is that it might be a life of passivity and stagnation and complacency. Just accepting for my life for what it is, and I don't have any choice, so I'll just take it as it comes, and hey, go from there. And that sort of takes away that idea of that if we have a dream or a desire or some ambition in life, that perhaps we don't really have much choice over that. So I struggle with this thought about free will, and certainly I believe that we do have some level of choice in our lives. I absolutely understand the science. Well, I don't really in-depthly understand the science behind it, if I'm totally honest. But I have a basic understanding about why free will doesn't exist. And the electronic charges in the brain just fire off willy-nilly and make us do things without much control. If we go back to the start of our lives, being brought into this world is a great gift. I think, to be born and to have this life, to have this experience is just one of the greatest gifts that we've got. And we've got to be grateful for that. We've got to be thankful for that opportunity. And the truth of the matter is we don't have choice over that opportunity. We don't decide whether we're going to be brought into the world or not. We just appear into the world and we are born and that's it. And from there, much of our early life is without choice as well. We don't have choice as to where we're born, the location we're born, the people the families that we're born into. And we don't have much choice about the upbringing that we have because as young beings, as a human or sapient species, we're sort of very reliant on our seniors, our adult members of society to raise us and bring us up. We're very dependent on others as far as the survival and our chances of survival goes. Now, I read some stats recently in a book by Yuval Noah Harari, his new book, and I think the book said that, the chances of our survival into adulthood nowadays is much greater than ever it has been before, and that's probably makes sense. And you can probably see that without looking into the research. But it's only like the stats now say that 5% of all births don't make it through to the adulthood, and that's a lot less than it ever has been, and that's over the world entirely. Whereas in the modern sort of worlds, in the first world countries and communities, etc., it's up to 1%. So 1% of children don't make it through into their adult years, which is a lot better than it ever has been. It's quite astonishing to me. That sort of shocked me. I thought it'd be even less than that. But anyway, that's an improvement from where we've been, and that's just because of our continual advancements as a human species. So that's interesting anyway. But out of all that said, like, we don't have much choice over all of that. Like, I didn't have any choice about the being born. I didn't have a choice about the parents I've been born into and the family I've been born into, and most of my upbringing was there with that limited choice. I didn't really get to decide on what school I went to and what teachers I had and all that sort of stuff. And yes, I could probably influence that, but again, when you're growing up, you don't really think about these things. You just sort of go with the flow and accept what is, and just a curious way you approach life as best you can. Now, I was fortunate to be brought up in a great family and with great circumstances. I know a lot of people aren't. So with all that said, we don't have much choice over all that. Now, what happens in our childhood, both our early childhood and our teen years? There's two critical stages of our development there, and it's really, as a parent myself, it's really important to me that I think about this stuff, because I've got two young girls that are going through that, and I want them to be conditioned in a way, because they're going to get conditioned no matter what I do, but they're going to get conditioned. I want them to be conditioned in a way that allows them to thrive. I really want them to be able to thrive in life, and I certainly don't want them to be conditioned in a way that restricts their progress or restricts the life that they can lead. So certainly I want to be a part of that, and I think both comes in the early stages and the later stages. I think in the early stages is predominantly, if I reflect back to my early childhood, I think that's where most of the clues exist around, the subject of my why, my purpose, what I'm passionate about. I think that's, if you can go back to those earlier years and the things that used to fire you up, the things you used to get excited about, the things you used to enjoy, when time passes without conscious awareness, like you just go, wow, look at the time, it's just slowly gone. As a child, that happens so commonly. Because we're not conscious of time. We just do things, we get involved, and we really enjoy it. But if you can think back to those moments where you really, really enjoyed, the memories that come first to mind, they're probably the things that you're really passionate about, and perhaps you should be pursuing a little bit more closely in life in your adult years as well. But as we venture into our teenage years, we develop further, we become more conditioned and domesticated, and certainly we start to try and figure out how we fit into the world. We try and start to define who we are and sort of our self-worth within the world. And in doing that, we try and find the behaviors and the groups that we're going to fit into, and we do what we can to fit into those groups as best we think we need to. And sometimes that's not conducive to the real path we want to take. We're doing it out of efforts of just to feel that self-worth, to feel that sense of belongingness, and sometimes that's good for our future into our adult lives, and sometimes it's perhaps not the best moves that we make. But because we just want to fit in, we want to be involved, we want to have some sense of worth in this world, we do what we can, we do what it takes. And sometimes that takes us away from our authentic self. Certainly I've experienced that in my life. I tried to fit in the best I could, and I don't think I did it totally unauthentically. I think I did a lot of things in my true nature, but I think I did a lot of things that weren't in my true nature. And I certainly found I did things and behaviours that perhaps weren't that conducive to most of my early adult years, that took me well and truly away from the path that I should have been living. And not that I have regrets, and not that that's the path that I should have been living, because obviously I've lived the path that I have lived for a reason. But there's probably things in my teenage years that if I had more awareness about and more consciousness about, without the need to fit in, without that need for self-worth and belonging, perhaps I would have done things a little bit differently, and my journey would have been entirely different. But for whatever the case, those two elements of our upbringing really condition our mind in a certain way that becomes sort of embedded, and that's their neural pathways that get created in the mind. And with these neural pathways that get created, we sort of then technically have no choice about what our behaviors are, because they're so embedded that we just go about doing them. And it is said that I think 95 to 98% of our behaviors are done subconsciously, without thought, without choice, essentially. We just go about doing them, and that's through our conditioned behaviors and upbringing that creates that. So that sort of, further strengthens the idea that we don't have free will, that we are just an accumulation of our past experiences. We're an accumulation of just chance being brought into this world, and our upbringings and our circumstances, etc. And all that obviously influences our upbringing as well in that development period and our experience. And therefore, we are who we are today. And so for whatever we do next is really just this firing within our system that we have absolutely no control over. So that's the whole free will piece. And I thought about that for a long time. And what really helps me contemplate these thoughts is contemplation, time to contemplate, and time to really just meditate on these thoughts and ideas. And I'm not a great meditator. I really don't know what I'm doing half the time, but I try, and I've put in the work, and I'm generally pretty persistent when I believe there's some benefits to doing something, particularly when there's benefits internally, when I can see that there's going to be a greater reward for my life, the quality of my life, my state of happiness. If I can see reward there, then I'll stick to that. And I know by improving the quality of my life, by improving my happiness, and really, as I suggested in a previous episode, my chance of survival, I feel that I'm more value to the rest of the people that are in my life, the rest of the world that I want to impact on. And that's constant progress for me. That's constant improvement. That's seeking constant improvement in my life. So meditation, I'm not a guru, but I'm figuring it out, and I'm certainly spending a lot more time there. And that is one practice that I'd certainly suggest if you want to contemplate these sort of thoughts in your own life. Any thoughts that you might have that's come up, and you sort of think about it, and you sort of question it, and it's challenging your mind. Just find that time to sit on it and reflect. So as I sit and meditate and reflect on these thoughts, like the idea of no free will, going back to that point where I say, well, if we don't have free will, that could be quite damaging to a life. If people just suddenly go, wow, I don't really have free will, there's no way I can influence the direction I take in life, so I might as well just accept it as it is and go with the flow. And to me, that's a defeatist sort of mentality. That's like just giving up and saying, hey, well, this is it. I might as well give up my dreams and just go with the flow, because this is my life and this is the life that I've been given, so I might as well accept it and take it as is. And I don't like that. I think there's got to be more. I think to find more meaning, we can't just do that. It's like falling into stagnation. And for me, I was close to that point where I was working in the corporate career, and you've heard my story if you're a fan of the show. But working in the corporate career, and I got to a point where I'm just like, is this what it's all about? Is this all that the life is? And I had everything. Like, not everything, but I had lots of stuff to be grateful for, certainly more than the average person in the world. And I just felt this sense of lacking, this emptiness, and it wasn't enough for me. And I was fortunate enough to have that chemistry within that sort of made me question it and made me pursue this curiosity of mine. And that has led me on a different path entirely, and led me on a journey of my own. And that wouldn't have happened without that ability to walk in that direction. Now, some might say, well, I had no choice over that, and that was bound to happen no matter what, because I'm naturally inquisitive, and that's a part of my genetic makeup, and that's a part of my upbringing and experience. That's just how I've evolved, and that would have come no matter what. And for other people, it just doesn't come because, that's their upbringing, that's their story, and not their story, that's their genetic makeup in essence. But I really believe I had influence over that, because I could have easily just accepted life as it was and said, hey, well, this is the way it is, and this is the career that I've chosen, and this is where I'm at, and that's life, and just accept it and go with the flow and continue on. But I challenged it, and it wasn't an easy challenge. It wasn't something that came with ease. It takes work. But the fact of the matter is that if I think back to this whole transition of mine, and it's still continuing, that I've done the work. I've put in the efforts to do the work to make the change happen. And for me, I believe I have had the choice to do that. I could have accepted defeat. I could have allowed myself to just say, hey, it's too hard and why bother? I might as well just accept the flow. But I didn't. I made some choices. So that's the fear for me about free will and accepting that we don't have free will, is that you might fall into that complacent sort of life. And I certainly don't think that's a good thing. The other part of it is that it is quite humbling or peaceful sort of calming thought, because if you can really just get into the zone, into the flow of life, and just accept the flow as it is, and accept the moments as they are, accept what is as it is, you might be able to sort of be more calm about everything. And certainly by continually working on the practice of mindfulness and my meditation and just me observing my mind and my thoughts, it's allowed me to find that sense of calmness where I don't seem to be wildly chasing around trying to control external matters, external elements in my life, and control, trying to control exactly how I do things or behave or think. But I have influenced it. I have influenced that all in the process, but I've found more calmness in the process as well. And that's sort of hard to really put into words, but I mean, I was just driving today, and it's truly an amazing experience, but I was just driving today after a chat with a friend, and I wanted to just yell out how happy I was feeling, and it's come from a lot of hard work, because I just haven't had that sense, and it's like a deeper sense. It's not because I've earned an extra $1 million or bought a new car or eaten a nice lunch or going to a nice lunch or just met a new person in life or anything like that. It's everything is as it is, but I have this deeper grounding and this sense of calmness, and I'm still ambitious. I've still got dreams. I've still got big dreams, but there's this sense of calmness that has come to me, and I think it's happened by accepting that this is the flow and this is the way the course of my life is going. And it's not by letting go and accepting this is the course and accepting that I don't have any influence over it. It's just by accepting the flow, the moment, the pleasantries and the unpleasantries of everything that is in my life right now, and just saying, hey, well, that's cool. That's how it is. And the biggest part of that, this is very Buddhist, the Buddha in me, I guess, but the biggest part of that is understanding that nothing is permanent. And the more I experience the life and the more I challenge myself and the more I go and push myself towards change, the more I realize that nothing is permanent. And really, when you meditate, you sit there and you breathe, and it's hard to clear thoughts. You can't clear thoughts, at least as far as I'm aware. But you can certainly slow thoughts, and you can certainly start to be really clear about the thoughts, and you can see the thoughts. It sounds so simple and crazy sort of, but when you're sitting there meditating, you can see the thoughts come in to your mind, like they just sort of pop in to your mind, and then you can just watch them, and then because you're just in that state, you can sort of just let them go, and they just depart, and nothing is permanent, just as much as the thought isn't permanent. But what really struck me is where those thoughts were rising from, and pretty much every thought that I was having, I could see the point where they were rising from. I could see the past experience. I could see why the thoughts exist. And that's to do with something that's happened in my life. It's to do with something that I'm thinking about, wanting to sort of pursue. It's about, just something that I've observed or confronted or is right with me in that moment. And for that reason, I thought, well, if that's the case, if that's where my thoughts are rising from, and there's not a thought that comes up that doesn't have an attachment to some past, future, or present sort of object. They all seem to arise from something that I've faced. Nothing was new. And in that I thought, well, if there is no such thing as free will, then how is this possible that these thoughts are coming up from my past, my future, my thoughts, my thoughts about the future, the objects that I've confronted in life, the meal that I had for breakfast, or whatever it might be, a comment that someone made, something that I've read somewhere. Wherever these thoughts are coming from, it's something that I've faced. It's what I call it, a stimulus. And I thought, well, if that's the case, if nothing is absolutely new, and it's all a matter of what I've put myself in front of or what I've experienced, then I certainly have influence over the direction of my life and over the thoughts, because I believe that the thoughts then influence, the beliefs that we create, the ideas that we have, the behaviors that we then take, the action that we then take, and that really does create our reality. And that's where I really just couldn't make sense of this whole lacking of free will, this whole idea that free will doesn't exist. And then I thought about it deeper. I thought, our whole life up until this point, and everything that I've done and everything that I'll do next, is all based on that past experience. Now, whilst that past experience is gone and beyond me, and I can't do much to change that, and perhaps a lot of that past experience perhaps was without my choice because of the upbringing, the world I've been brought into, etc. I sort of feel that going forward from here, the experiences that I have are really my choice. What I expose myself to is really my choice. And in all that, what I do next can really influence those future thoughts. And those future thoughts will then roll on to beliefs, behaviors, etc. and my reality. So I thought, whilst I can't influence the thoughts that come up and when they come up, I can certainly influence the source of the thoughts. And that is by choosing what I expose myself to. Now, I can't figure out how there is no ability to choose of what I expose myself to, because I can simply, if I want to, right now, switch this off, turn on the news and watch the news. I could simply turn this off and, I don't know, go smoke some drugs. I mean, there's not that that's available, but there's those choices that we have, and it's what I expose myself to next. Like when I switch this off, I'll probably have a meal and that'll probably stimulate thoughts. There's just so much choice in what we expose ourselves to that it's ridiculous. Now, there's a sense that's saying that we don't have much control over that next move, like perhaps because it's so embedded in our neural pathways that it's just going to happen regardless. And like if you're so used to watching news at whatever time it is of the day right now, if you're used to watching news at that time every day, you probably do it, and it's going to be one of those things that will be a hard chain to break. But if you can just influence it by being mindful before you do something and say, hey, is this what I want to do? And you can do that. Loretta Bruning sort of suggested that you just sort of, when you have that moment before you're about to make a decision to do something, if you can do something like crazy, and Tony Robbins talks about this too, if you can yell or shout or do something crazy, jump up and down, twirl around, anything to just remind yourself when that next moment comes up where you're about to make a similar choice or the same choice, that reminds you to stop and think and pause and just inject that little bit of awareness into that moment, that might help you make a different decision. And depending on the behavior, depending on how big this pathway within your brain is, the longer that might take to change that behavior, to change that choice or your ability to influence that choice. But when you do, it's amazing what happens. And for me, being an addict, I've smoked cigarettes for the majority of my life, and certainly stopping smoking cigarettes is one of those things where it's so hard. You know that it's not going to be good for you, and you just do it subconsciously. But when you start being aware and when you start consciously saying, I really want to stop doing this, each one you notice before you do it what you're doing, and you have that opportunity, but you still do it because it's so embedded. It's such an addiction that you just sort of go with it and do it. But then over time, when you're sort of more and more aware, the more you pound yourself with this sort of thought, the more chances you have to change that decision, and eventually you make that decision and it sort of happens. And look, I've been a non-smoker for only a short period of time, but and I'm hoping it'll stick. But certainly, I made that choice, and I haven't turned back on it yet. So like those choices, I think they're really important to just be present and be aware of them. And if there's something that you're exposing yourself to that isn't good for positive, conducive thought, then perhaps you need to make a different choice. And perhaps you just need to do that by firstly becoming aware before you're making that choice, before that decision comes up. Don't beat yourself up if you still make the decision you don't want to make. Go into it and do what you have to do, but just continually remind yourself to be aware before those choices happen. And slowly over time, you'll influence your thoughts by exposing yourself to more positivity and stuff that's going to be conducive to your longevity, to the reality that you really want to create. And that's why I think that we do have choice. So yes, I understand that there's a lacking of free will, and I understand to a basic level how it all works, but I also believe that it's relative to what we expose ourselves to, and that we have choice over. So if there's things in your life that are causing negative thoughts, if there's things that are in your life that are causing poison, reject them. You know if they're causing you poison because you're aware of them, and you have the ability to reject them. Just like your body does have ability to reject bacteria that's not good for you, by you becoming sick, you throw up, something like that. That's your body saying, hey, this isn't good for you, this is bad, let's move away from this and try and find something that's more positive and conducive to the life that we want to live. You can do the same with your thoughts. So those thoughts that come in that make you feel bad, make you feel ill, that don't leave you with pleasing taste, you can work to sort of avoid continually confronting them. And that's really by creating that sense of awareness, and that will take practice. That will take time. It'll take time to do the work. It'll take time to make the change, and you might slip and fall and make mistakes and fall back on those paths, those super highways. And as what's his name, Charles Duhigg, in his book The Power of Habit, talks about, we can't change those habits, we can't change those behaviors, and perhaps we can't change a lot of those thoughts that are there and existing, but we can certainly override them with new existing thoughts, new existing behaviors. And once they become, after practice, bigger and bigger, perhaps they can have more effect on the reality we want to live and the life we want to live. So guys, there's my thought today. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is the Hidden Why podcast. You know what to do. You need to go out there and breathe more passion into every single moment. You need to find more purpose in everything you do. And in doing so, you will discover your why. This is the Hidden Why. My name is Leigh Martinuzzi, signing out. Peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon.